have you.
Mr. President, in your speeches now, you rarely talk or mention Osama bin Laden. Why is that? Also, can you tell the American people if you have any more information, if you know if he is dead or alive? Final part here. Deep in your heart, don't you truly believe that until you find out if he is dead or alive, you won't really eliminate the threat of it?
Well, deep in my heart, I know the man's on the run if he's alive at all. And who knows if he's hiding in some cave or not. We hadn't heard from him in a long time. And the idea of focusing on one person is really indicates to me people don't understand the scope of the mission. Terror is bigger than one person. And he's a person who's now been marginalized. His network is, his host government has been destroyed. He's the ultimate parasite who found weakness, exploited it, and met his match. He is, as I mentioned in my speeches, I do mention the fact that this is a fellow who is willing to commit youngsters to their death, and he himself tries to hide, if in fact he's hiding at all. So I don't know where he is. Nor do I just don't spend that much time on it.
Why can't you stay out of this? Leave me buried.
What is Scenario 12D? We know it's a war game scenario, that it has to do with airline counterterrorism. Why is that important enough to kill for?
Because it's no longer a game.
If some terrorist group wants to act out this scenario, why target you for assassination?
Depends on who your terrorists are.
The men who conceived of it in the first place. You're saying our government plans to commit a terrorist act against a domestic airline?
There you go. Indicting the entire government as usual. It's a faction. A small faction.
For what possible gain?
The Cold War's over, John. But with no clear enemy to stockpile against, the arms market's flat. But bring down a fully loaded 727 into the middle of New York City, and you'll find a dozen tin-pot dictators all over the world just clamoring to take responsibility and begging to be smart-bombed.
I can't believe it. This is about increasing arms sales.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
We want to tell you what we know as we know it. We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center in New York City.
Erected in the early 1970s, the Twin Towers were a feat of modern-day structural engineering. Towering at 110 stories and containing 200,000 tons of steel, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, 43,600 windows, and 12,000 miles of electrical cabling. In this section, we will show the impossibility of the official 9/11 story, which claims jet-grade kerosene, which burns at between 800 and 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, weakened and caused the structural steel used in the towers to bend and buckle, causing the towers' collapse. Since structural steel doesn't melt or become red hot until it reaches temperatures in excess of 2,750 degrees, here we will explore the evidence proving the official story behind the collapse of the World Trade Center towers is a complete fraud.
Has just completely collapsed. The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the old demolitions of these old buildings, it folded down on itself, and it is not there anymore.
That should be it.
It has completely collapsed.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
That's the southern tower you're talking about. If you wish to bring anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
Here, we will use the Landmark building in Fort Worth, Texas, demolished in 2006 by Controlled Demolition Incorporated, as an example of the typical characteristics seen in a controlled demolition. Note, white flashes seen in the windows of the building are similar to those following the impacts of the planes at the World Trade Center, as well as seen prior to the collapse of the building. Also note the explosive sound of the basement being blown out prior to the building collapsing into its own footprint.
Unbelievable. Wow, that might have goosebumps. Unbelievable. Whoa.
Now, let's examine video footage of the World Trade Center, which clearly shows white demolition charges coming from inside of the buildings.
So in other words, Senator Shelby, I know you agree with Senator Graham that we need to invest much more in people.
A guy was with me in the shop, and he was down on the ground and he started to cry. I says, listen, you didn't, I said, you get hurt? He says, no. I says, well, if you're not hurt, stop the crying. You gotta get our act together. We gotta get out of here. He says, I says, I can't walk because I'm shot. So he says, where we going to go? I said, we're going to get out of here. So I crawl on my left side.
Anything from your position right now? Ambulances, sirens?
Absolutely.
Did you see any actual people in that area who may have been hit by any of this debris or were not able to get out of the way? Can you see any crowds that may be too close to where they should be? Anything like that?
No, I don't think so, and it's not a highly trafficked area at the base of the World Trade Center, so that's one fortunate thing.
Gene, right now we're continuing to look at pictures of this devastating scene.
The following clip was edited out of an HBO September 11th documentary. It is significant to note because it clearly shows what appears to be the sound of a bomb going off in the World Trade Center prior to its collapse. Note that this sound sounds very similar to the sound heard from the Landmark building prior to the building's implosion.
Yeah, here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
To be right now. You gotta get back from here. I know that. You gotta get back.
All right. Don't worry about me. You need to make calls right now. All right. You want to call your mother or something?
To be right now. You gotta get back from here.
Next, let's examine the explosive sound of the basement being blown out prior to the building's collapse. This is important to note because there are many reports from September 11th which report bombs going off in the basement of the Twin Towers prior to the building's collapse.
Unbelievable.
Two suspects are in FBI custody after a truckload of explosives was discovered around the George Washington Bridge. That bridge links New York to New Jersey over the Hudson River. Whether the discovery of those explosives has anything to do with other events today is unclear, but the FBI has two suspects in hand, said the truck load of explosives, enough explosives were in the truck to do great damage to the George Washington Bridge. But
Rick Sanchez has been there throughout this morning for us. Rick, tell us where you are and what the latest is.
Well, I'm in that area, if you're familiar with this area, of where West Broadway and Hudson come together right at Chambers. That would put us about a block and a half away from the site of where the explosion was. That area has just been evacuated because police have found what they describe as a suspicious device, and they fear that it might be something that could lead to another explosion. Obviously, there's a real sense of caution here on the part of police. I spoke with some police officials moments ago, Chris, and they told me that they have reason to believe that one of the explosions at the World Trade Center, aside from the ones that may have been caused by the impact of the plane with the building, may have been caused by a van that was parked in the building that may have had some type of explosive device in it. So their fear is that there may have been explosive device planted either in the building or in the adjacent area, and that's why they're being so cautious.
No second plane. It was a bomb. Bomb in another building, not second plane. That was a bomb. Who said the second plane?
That's what we're told, the second plane. We saw it on television.
I saw everything.
All right. Thanks a lot. This is...
You have two 110-story office buildings. You don't find a desk. You don't find a chair. You don't find a telephone, a computer. The biggest piece of a telephone I found was half of the keypad, and it was about this big. The building collapsed to dust.
look at the biggest smoking gun concerning September 11th. World Trade Center Building Number 7. Radio talk show host Jack Blood discusses World Trade Center Building 7.
Now I have to bring this up to you guys, Building 7, because how many people even know there was a Building 7 that fell? Fell at 6 o'clock, and a lot of the media pundits, including Dan Rather, said live on international TV, that looks like a controlled demolition.
Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
By the time Building 7 had fallen, at 5:18 in the afternoon on September 11th, Peter Jennings, who began the day, speculating that the buildings looked like they had been brought down by a controlled demolition, began parroting the official government story that the buildings had been weakened by the airplanes and the jet fuel crashing into the building and causing them to collapse.
That's, Peter, it was an astonishing thing because the civilians who were standing around here were all amazed, but things have become so bizarre down here that the hundreds of firemen who were standing around looked at it, felt a bit shocked, but then just said, well, we're going to have even more work to do. Associate producer Lucy Kerrigan had been over near that building just a little bit earlier, and the policeman had told her that they feared the building was going to come down, that they were evacuating people from around it. So that's one little bit of good news, is that there may have been fewer casualties from this latest collapse than there otherwise might have been, because they knew of the potential. But it's now still a very hot day here. The search and rescue operation is mounting even larger. There are dozens and dozens of fire trucks backed up on the West Side Highway, police trucks. There are what look like hundreds of volunteers who have showed up, who have been marshaled by the Red Cross, all with masks to avoid breathing in dust, but nobody can go in yet. We're still looking at buildings that are on fire down in the center of the financial district, and it's clearly a great deal of devastation. It's not too strong a word at all. It's going to take a while even to assess how bad it is.
Bill, do you have any idea whether or not other buildings in the immediate area are vulnerable at the moment, whether there's concern about any other building as there was about this additional one after the towers?
Well, from the angle I'm looking at, we can see one other building still on fire, and it seems to be on fire through the length of it. I would estimate that's like a 30 or 40, about a 30 or 40 story building. The problem for any one of us, of course, is that because of the other buildings down here still standing, which are so tall, you can't get a very clean view of the whole thing from the ground. But there's at least one, and it's clearly going to go on into the night. There's a lot of black smoke pouring out of that building now.
Thank you, Bill. Just we just stay with this photograph for this graphic for just a second. Well, no, there's number 7 coming down. When you think that part of the component of news coverage around the country every year is the excitement and the fun that people get watching an old building being demolished, and they wire it very carefully for days, and it's a very careful operation in order to make sure that a building comes down safely. I think the last one we saw was when they brought down one of the old casinos in Las Vegas. I mean, this is just stunning to see these things come down inside. In the case of the north and south towers there of the World Trade Center, come down within a couple of hours as a result of the structural damage, weakening that was done when these aircraft hit them. And now number 7, the World Trade Center, which is 47 stories tall. We're talking with the World Trade Center north and south 110 stories tall. An eerie experience to be in them at the best of times. They sway in the wind, and people have long had experiences with them. But those, and as Bill Blakemore said just a moment ago, the landscape of New York City has changed one again. And in this instance, it's not New York City, it's not New Yorkers' cities, it's everybody in the country's city at this moment. because this was an attack on the United States, no question about it. Everybody said it all day, a declaration of war, an act of war against the United States. We've had any number of politicians and commentators, us included,
In 2007, startling new video evidence concerning the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 began to surface on the internet. The BBC had reported 26 minutes prior to Building 7's collapse that the Salomon Brothers building, World Trade Center Building 7, had collapsed, when in fact the building is still seen visible behind the reporter during her presentation. Here, we will look at other examples of media prior knowledge of the collapse of Building 7.
The BBC was reporting and ABC News was reporting that Building 7 fell when it was actually right behind them.
Yeah!
It still hadn't fallen yet.
Yeah!
Somebody gave the order that the building was going to fall, including to all of the firefighters on the ground, the cops on the ground.
Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope, because this whole downtown area behind me has been completely sealed off and evacuated, apart from the emergency workers. That was done by the mayor, Rudy Giuliani, much earlier today, because of, course, the dreadful collapse of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. But New York, very much a city still in chaos. The phones are not working properly, the subway lines are not working properly. And we know that down there near the World Trade Center there are 3 schools that are being turned into triage centers for emergency treatment. And I know that over in New York Harbor, where the famous Statue of Liberty is, there's a field hospital where 1,500 people are being treated. And we have heard, though it's unconfirmed as yet, that 100 New York City police officers have been taken there as well for treatment. But we do need to confirm those figures for the officers.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7, in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. And you, to be honest, can see these pictures a little bit more clearly than I. But building number 7, one of the buildings in this very large complex of buildings that is the Trade Center, there were, and that is the right way to put it, there were the 2 towers. But then there are a number of support buildings around it, retail spaces, restaurants, office space, garages. The trains come in from New Jersey, bringing commuters, taking commuters back, come into the complex that is the World Trade Center. And now we are told that there's a fire there, and that building may collapse as well, as you can see. We can see, as we look now back downtown, we can see the billowing smoke. It is extraordinary to us, I guess, is how long this scene has gone on. The smoke has not cleared at all. It has not lightened at all. There was that horrific moment when the towers collapsed, and then we've been in this sort of situation ever since, as the fires continue to burn. Rose Arce, one of our producers who has been slowly and diligently making her way to the building, described the fires that she saw in the area of the towers themselves, and clearly those fires continue to burn at about 4:15 Eastern Daylight Time today, in an unbelievable and awful scene in New York. Judy?
Many of whom, no doubt, from earlier this morning are casualties of the first events of the day, not put those rescue workers into danger themselves. So that is obviously the problem. We were told by a couple of people that were in there before rescue workers that there are bodies, a number of bodies lying around in the debris and on the street there. Obviously, part of the job will be to bring them out. We are also told by Port Authority officials that the building over there, which is building number 7, which you can see, it is referred to as building number 7. It's about, I would say probably a 20-story building, that there is some concern on the part of Port Authority officials about the stability of that building at this point. So obviously, as we have been discussing all day, a very, very difficult circumstance here as to exactly when that area really is going to be truly secure. Tom?
Dan Abrams, are you there?
Tom, can you hear me?
Yes.
I am here. Okay. As you can see, Tom, behind me, the smoke's still billowing from the area where the Trade Center was. There's still concern about a building right there where there is a fire still going, and the police here still concerned that that building, too, may be in jeopardy. They continue to push the crowds back. A block, another block, another block. They remain concerned that that building could fall as well. They're concerned about the way the wind has been moving.
Keep your eye on that building, it'll be coming down.
This building is about to blow up. Move it back.
All right, guys? Sorry.
We are looking back. There's a building about to blow up. On flame. Debris coming down.
Just in the last few seconds, another building, building number 7, one of the buildings in support of the World Trade Center towers, has collapsed. This is no small building, as you can see, at 47 stories. It would stand out in most American cities.
What happened to Building 7? Let's ask the leaseholder, Larry Silverstein, who took out a record insurance policy 3 months before September 11th, guarding specifically and covering against acts of terrorism. Larry, tell us about what happened to Building 7.
I think I might need deep psychoanalysis to fully understand and respond to that question.
That's okay, Larry. We'll come back to you later. We traveled to Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, to speak with author and John F. Kennedy assassination expert Robert Groden. Groden has worked on many Hollywood TV and movie projects and was a consultant on Oliver Stone's JFK. We asked Mr. Groden his opinions on 9/11 being an inside job.
Hi, my name is Robert Groden. We're here in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. Back about 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I worked at the World Trade Center on the 96th floor of the South Tower. And I used to dread going to work every day. I always felt that that place was unsafe to begin with. I always fantasized that there might be a fire there some night and there'd be no way out. If something began below the 96th floor, I'd have been trapped up there. And I always wondered if the air conditioning stopped working, how would we get air to breathe in that building? There's just no way to open up the windows. In any case, I always feared for people who worked in that building. I didn't like it. It made me feel very, very, very nervous, and I really felt and still do for the victims of 9/11. They didn't stand a chance, and I hope someday we learn the whole truth about what really did happen there. And as far as I'm concerned, whether the Bush administration had or didn't have anything to do with it, they certainly took advantage of it and used it to their advantage. And I mean, it's unforgivable. It's supposed to be an especially hot place in hell for those people that took advantage of this and utilized it for monetary gain.
There is a chance for the President of the United States to use this disaster to carry out what his father, a phrase his father used, I think, only once, and hasn't been used since, and that is a new world order.
And after 1989, President
Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order, and instead it looks like we got a lot of disorder. And we still, and after 9/11, we've been more sensitive to the.
All these new challenges are bringing together about the biggest restructuring we have ever seen, not just of the global economy, but of the global order as a whole. And 200 years ago, a famous British Foreign Secretary said that the new world had been called into existence to redress the balance of the old. In 1990, another old world ended, dominated by the Cold War, and people talked then, in 1990, of a new world order. What they actually meant then was a new political order. And what was not foreseen then, but is obvious now from everything that we see and do, what we experience in every day of our life, is the sheer scale and speed and scope of globalization. And it's only now that we can begin to understand that the world order that globalization brings and what it's going to look like, it's driven forward now not just by the balance of military strength, the Cold War times, or ordinary political power. It's being driven forward by a seismic shift in economic power that we see around us. But what does the new world order mean for countries like ours who are looking to succeed? I suggest that the countries that are going to succeed are those that combine flexibility, free trade, open markets, with proper stewardship of the environment and investment in education, infrastructure and innovation. And the question for us is how we meet and master all these challenges to ensure that Britain enhances its competitiveness in the process and realises what I believe is our destiny of success in this new world order. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges for the future.
In Part 2, we will examine some of the New World Order players that have stood to gain from the events of September 11, 2001, including likely suspects whose role has enabled them to use the United States to march the world one step closer to global government. According to Wikipedia, the Project for the New American Century is an American neoconservative think tank based in Washington, D.C., co-founded as a non-profit educational organization by William Crystal and Robert Kagan in early 1997. The PNAC document, Rebuilding America's Defenses, published in 2000, is the blueprint for the geopolitical military structure in the early 21st century. In any crime investigation, the key elements in determining suspects are motive, opportunity, and benefit.
The co-chair of the 9/11 Commission itself admits to us that the process he headed up was seriously flawed.
So there are all kinds of reasons. We thought we were set up to fail. We got started late. We had a very short time frame. Indeed, we had to get it extended. We did not have enough money. They were afraid we were going to hang somebody, that we would point the finger.
Is one of the reasons why these guys aren't getting funded and it's so late is that someone's got something to hide?
There is, well, a lot of people have things to hide.
Well, who in this case?
Well, look, you can go down the list and probably identify 100 people who made mistakes that day.
What were their errors?
They didn't pay enough attention.
In June 2001, former World Bank President and Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz gave a chilling speech to the graduating class of West Point Academy. Wolfowitz stated in his speech that surprise and things such as Pearl Harbor would be something that these graduating cadets would have to get used to, as the military intelligence that comes into the country on a yearly basis is too wide and varied for the United States military to act on all the information it gets. This is a strange and scary bit of foreshadowing spoken by the man who wrote the 2000 PNAC document, Rebuilding America's Defenses, in which he states that we need a catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor.
Extensive scientific research has demonstrated that on an average day in June, the average human brain is capable of remembering at most one thought from a commencement speech. But since today is cooler than average, and West Pointers are definitely above average, I will challenge you to think this morning about two words: surprise and courage. This year marks the 60th anniversary of a military disaster whose name has become synonymous with surprise: the attack on Pearl Harbor. Interestingly, that surprise attack was preceded by an astonishing number of unheeded warnings and missed signals. Intelligence reports warned of a surprise move in any direction, but this made the Army commander in Honolulu think of sabotage, not attack. People were reading newspapers in Hawaii which cited promising reports about intensive Japanese diplomatic efforts, unaware that these were merely a charade. An ultra-secret code-breaking operation, one of the most remarkable achievements in American intelligence history, an operation called Magic, had unlocked the most private Japanese communications. But the operation was considered so secret and so vulnerable to compromise that the distribution of its product was restricted to the point that our field commanders didn't make the need-to-know list. And at 7 a.m. on December 7th, at Opana Radar Station, two privates detected what they called something completely out of the ordinary. In fact, it was so out of the ordinary that the inexperienced watch officer assumed it must be friendly airplanes and told them just forget about it. Yet military history is full of surprises, even if few are as dramatic or as memorable as Pearl Harbor. Surprise happens so often that it's surprising that we're still surprised by it. Very few of these surprises are the product of simple blindness or simple stupidity. Almost always there have been warnings and signals that have been missed, sometimes because there were just too many warnings to pick the right one out, sometimes because of what one scholar of Pearl Harbor called a poverty of expectations, a routine obsession with a few familiar dangers. This expectation of the familiar has gotten whole governments, sometimes whole societies, into trouble.
Our anger should clearly be directed, and the blame should clearly be directed at one source and one source alone: the terrorists who killed our loved ones.
The former mayor testified that in the years before 9/11, the city had been warned repeatedly of a terrorist threat and had drilled and prepared for many scenarios, but not an aerial attack. Would he have taken different steps if he had been aware of the president's daily brief of August 6, 2001, which mentioned hijacking and New York City?
If that information had been given to us or more warnings had been given in the summer of 2001, I can't honestly tell you we would have done anything differently.
You could tell me what you think of this set.
I like that.
This may be the best of all. Oh, you dirty boy, you. Oh. Donald, I thought you were a gentleman.
You can't say I didn't try.
New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani discusses foreknowledge of the collapse of the World Trade Centers.
I really don't want to say right now, Peter. I think it's going to be a horrible number. I saw people jumping out of the World Trade Center. I saw some of the firefighters who I know going into the building. And we were in a building in which we were trapped for about 10, 15 minutes.
Are you talking about did you go immediately to the Office of Emergency Management?
I went down to the scene and we set up headquarters at 75 Barclay Street, which was right there with the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, the head of emergency management. And we were operating out of there when we were told that the World Trade Center was going to collapse. And it did collapse before we could actually get out of the building. So we were trapped in the building for 10, 15 minutes and finally found an exit, got out, walked north, and took a lot of people with us.
My question is, the Office of Emergency Management headquarters, into which you put enormous effort for coordination in a disaster like this, has it been damaged? Is it still operating? It's gone?
It's been damaged. I don't know how badly. And right now, that whole area of Manhattan, including the police department, which is another area we would operate from, City Hall, as another area we would operate from, have been closed off. So we've moved to a secure location in Midtown Manhattan where we're operating city government.
Is it fair to say, do you think, that all of your drills for dealing with terrorism and disaster are going according to plan, or has this been of such of magnitude that we've just all been caught totally off balance?
Oh, there's no question we were all caught totally off balance. No one could possibly expect large airplanes to crash into the World Trade Center.
So let's go back to the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan on the west side and talk to Don Daler. Don.
Over for New York yet. As you know, this is one of the most densely constructed pieces of real estate in the world, and when the Twin Towers collapsed, it appears that they ignited fires on surrounding buildings. I'm seeing a huge amount of smoke. Just about 15 minutes ago, there was a phalanx of firemen, I would say probably about 50 firemen, moving deliberately into this black cloud of smoke. They disappeared completely into it. Then about 5 minutes ago, there was quite a bit of activity as a number of police officers started moving back individuals as well as firemen who were with their fire trucks away. So they moved the line of demarcation back away from that area. And I can see at least 2 buildings look to be partially involved. Just from my vantage point, I'm about 4 blocks away from where the Twin Towers once stood. Right before the second tower collapsed, when you and John were talking about the concerns over that possibility, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani walked right past me here on Church Street and Duane Street, again about 4 blocks from that area, moving his entourage out of that region. And then just moments later was when the collapse happened. There was a complete cessation of ambulances and any kind of emergency traffic in this area for about 5 minutes. And then slowly I saw 1 or 2 ambulances trickling out of this incredible cloud of dust with debris on top of them. Some of them had broken windshields. There was a police car that came by that looked like the top had been almost completely stove in.
And I haven't been able to find out if they're safe yet.
Your emergency command center, what some people have called a bunker, was located, was it not, in one of the World Trade Center buildings?
It was located close enough to it so that it was affected by it. It's not in one of the buildings, but it was located right in that area, as is City Hall, the police department, and all of them had to be evacuated. So that area of Manhattan, once I was in a building at the time that we were using as a command center, and we were trapped in the building for a while, for about 20 minutes, not able to get out different exits that were overcome with smoke and debris.
I think we all
the losses to our police department and fire department
Sir,
are going to be severe.
Do you believe that was there another set of explosions that caused the buildings to collapse, or was it the structural damage caused by the plane?
I don't know. I saw the first collapse and heard the second because I was in a building when the second took place. I think it was structural, but I cannot be sure.
Because I think what he was thinking was this was going to be a day-long operation, and the more the people hung around, the harder it was going to be to get the ambulances in, to get the fire trucks in. The other thing he was thinking was the way the debris was falling, it was harming more of the people to the south and west. Maybe the wind, maybe the way it was to the building, but the debris that was falling down didn't seem to be falling to the north. It seemed to be falling to the west and the south. And you could see people getting hit by it, probably getting killed by it. I don't know that we can accurately figure out how many people were killed before the building came down and how many were killed before by the things coming off the building.
Did it occur to you at all at that time that these buildings might actually collapse?
Yeah, but not the way they did. It occurred to all of us that they would ultimately collapse over the way buildings usually collapse, which is in stages. It looked like at some point the top of the building had come off, and then maybe the middle of the building, and then maybe there'd be a shell left, and the way number 7 came down, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, over a period of time. But the idea that it would the implosion that took place, I actually didn't realize that until much later, because when that happened, I was in the police department command post, so I didn't see it. I heard it.
World Trade Center 7 had always been considered the starting point for rebuilding. Located north of the slurry wall, 7 had been cleared faster than the rest of the site, and there had been no bodies to recover. Pelted by debris when the North Tower collapsed, 7 burned until late afternoon, allowing occupants to evacuate to safety.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Billionaire real estate investor Larry Silverstein is a prime example of someone with motive, opportunity, and gain. Silverstein acquired the World Trade Center complex in a record real estate deal of $3.2 billion on July 24, 2001. Silverstein also took out a record insurance policy of $1 billion with a specific clause stating that he would be the one that would be able to rebuild in the event of a disaster at the World Trade Centers. Mr. Silverstein was also the owner of World Trade Center Building 7. Erected in the mid-1980s, Silverstein often dreamt about owning the World Trade Center complex. This is important to note considering the only structure thus far rebuilt is Larry Silverstein's World Trade Center Building 7.
Everybody, not just New Yorkers, people around the United States and around the world have been curious about what design would be selected for the site of Ground Zero where the World Trade Center towers stood. Daniel Libeskind, the architect who lives in Berlin, has been selected. Now the focus is on the builder, the man who holds the lease. He joins me now for a conversation about his intentions. Larry Silverstein, welcome.
Thank you.
Just a bit of history. Why did you want to have the World Trade Center? What was it about the Trade Center for you as a real estate man that was important?
I think I might need deep psychoanalysis to fully understand and respond to that question. But, Charlie, I signed a lease with the Port Authority back in 1980 for a parcel of land that it owned with a carbide substation on it. And the signing of that lease gave me the right to build a major building on that site. And as a result of working with the Port Authority, we significantly increased the size of the building from 1 million feet to 2 million feet. And I proceeded to build it. And when I completed it in 1987, I remember at the dedication of that building, which is a large building, 2 million feet, significant size. I remember looking up at the Twin Towers, and here is this major edifice that I just completed. The Twin Towers dwarfed it by huge magnitudes. And I thought to myself, my goodness, wouldn't it be wonderful to someday own that real estate? And so when, years later, when it was decided that the port would exit the daily operation of real estate, Port Authority, I was approached by the Port Authority and asked if I would have an interest in competing for the opportunity. And my immediate response, without hesitation, was of course. And therein started.
Mr. Hamilton, I had a quick question for you, sir. I'd spoken with you on C-SPAN about a month ago, and we talked. We talked about Israeli policy.
We'd like to address.
Yeah, but why are we addressing the gorilla in the room? The gorilla in the room is U.S. support for Israel. You had made a mistake earlier. Yeah. You had said that the Israeli-Palestinian dispute wasn't addressed in the 9/11 Commission report. I beg to differ with that. On page 147, it is stated that the plotter of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was driven to attack us not because of radical ideology, as Prime Minister Blair, because of U.S. support for Israel. Why aren't we addressing that, sir?
All right, sir.
You got Mr. Bamford's book from me, James Bamford's A Pretext for War book. It conveys that we were attacked, and then you have Mr. Ross up here, who's basically affiliated with the Israeli lobby, AIPAC.
This is a conversation that you and I ought to have, but let's not take the time of our resource people. May we go to the next question, please? Thank you very much. I wanted to focus just a moment on the Presidential Emergency Operating Center. You were there for a good part of the day. I think you were there with the Vice President. And we had that order given, I think it was by the President, that authorized the shooting down of commercial aircraft that were suspected to be controlled by terrorists. Were you there when that order was given?
No, I was not. I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? Well, at the time I didn't know what all that meant. And
the flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And so I was not aware that that discussion had already taken place. And but in listening to the conversation between the young man and the Vice President, then at the time I didn't really recognize the significance of that. And then later I heard of the fact that the airplanes had been scrambled from Langley to come up to D.C., but those planes were still about 10 minutes away. And so then at the time we heard about the airplane that went into Pennsylvania, then I thought, oh my God, did we shoot it down? And then we had to, with the Vice President, go through the Pentagon to check that out.
Let me see if I understand. The plane that was headed toward the Pentagon and was some miles away, there was an order to shoot that plane down.
Well, I don't know that specifically, but I do know that the airplanes were scrambled from Langley or from Norfolk, the Norfolk area, and but I did not know about the order specifically, other than listening to that other conversation.
But there very clearly was an order to shoot commercial aircraft.
Subsequently, I found that out.
With respect to Flight 93, what type of information were you and the Vice President receiving about that flight?
The only information we had at that point was when it went into when it crashed.
I see. You didn't know beforehand about that airplane?
Did not.
And so there was no specific order there to shoot that plane down?
No, sir.
But there were military planes in the air in position to shoot down commercial aircraft.
That's right.
Here, we see Vice President Dick Cheney laugh and snicker as he references his secret involvement and membership in the Council on Foreign Relations.
A special televised meeting of the New York-based Council on Foreign Relations provides a window to the real story. The speaker, Vice President Dick Cheney, takes a question from David Rockefeller.
Vice President, I just enjoyed so much your whole speech, but I was particularly pleased that you gave such a strong endorsement for the free trade agreement for all the Americas, subject that has been of great concern to me for many years, and particularly recently, and I think it's absolutely essential for the strength of our economy.
Rockefeller's role in the drive for an FTAA was a lot more central than he portrays. Rockefeller cultivated Latin American leaders who could be counted on to support such a proposal. Both the 1994 Miami Summit and the FTAA proposal were conceived and nurtured by a Rockefeller-created network. Prominent among the organizations sponsoring the Miami event were the Council of the Americas, founder and honorary chairman David Rockefeller, the Americas Society, chairman David Rockefeller, the Forum of the Americas, founder David Rockefeller, the Institute for International Economics, financial backer and board member David Rockefeller, the Trilateral Commission, founder and honorary chairman David Rockefeller. Rockefeller's influence also extends to the current administration. He was chairman emeritus of the CFR when Vice President Dick Cheney once served as a director, a relationship that Cheney concealed during his congressional career.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
Appointed to head up the 9/11 Commission, former National Security Advisor and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger stepped down as chairman of the commission after 9/11 victims' family members began asking about Kissinger's ties to the Saudi oil and bin Laden oil interests.
Are we at one of those moments in history in which there is the necessity for a new world order? A, because of what's taken place in the Middle East, the rise of different kinds of groups, and B, what's happened in Asia, meaning that there has been a shift from the West to the East.
There's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world, and he has to have some luck. The United States, a country which really doesn't understand foreign policy very well in terms of its public, because its public is not all that engaged in the world. Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
Within the next 4 years, we will see the emergence of a new international order.
The beginning of a new international order, and it could well be that this president, who is so reviled by intellectuals, will emerge as one of the seminal presidents of his period.
Let's assume
of American and modern history.
One of the seminal presidents.
He could.
What does he have to do to achieve that status?
Well, he has to do certain things, and he has to have some luck. Although I believe in the Branch Rickey statement.
When he was a general manager of the
luck is
Dodgers.
the residue of design.
What did he say?
He said luck is the residue of design.
Right.
He said it about baseball.
I know.
But
Kissinger is also known as a go-between and business frontman for David Rockefeller. Founder of the CFR and Trilateral Commission, Rockefeller appointed Kissinger to stage the violent overthrow of Salvador Allende on September 11, 1973. In order to protect Rockefeller oil interests and ITT-owned copper mines in Chile. According to declassified National Security Archive documents from 2000, ITT funded Allende's opponents in their successful coup attempt.
After Schneider's death, Allende was elected, but the efforts of Kissinger and Nixon to overthrow Allende would ultimately succeed. In 1973, military forces launched a coup in Santiago, killing Allende. Augusto Pinochet would assume power and begin a reign of terror that would last 17 years. The date was September 11th. 28 years later to the day, the Washington Post announced a lawsuit brought against Henry Kissinger by Rennie Schneider Jr. for the death of his father. The news would be overshadowed by the events of later that morning.
I'm sure they would want your observations on what you see here.
On the one hand, it's a testimony to what evil can do in the world. But what the mayor and his associates have done here shows the resilience and the power of the human spirit.
As the former Secretary of State surveyed the wreckage, the campaign had already begun to see that those responsible for the loss of innocent life be captured and brought to justice.
With the exception of Rudy Giuliani, all of the aforementioned suspects have one tie that binds them all together. They are all members of the Trilateral Commission. Founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller, the Trilateral Commission is at the forefront of a global fascist dictatorship set on the destruction of America and all sovereign nations. When examining suspects of 9/11 and the New World Order, all roads always lead to David Rockefeller. Founder of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, David Rockefeller is at the forefront of examples of individuals who stood to gain from 9/11. Rockefeller has a verifiable history of using the United States military against civilian populations for the benefit of corporate interests.
You also mentioned in here an encounter with Saddam Hussein in Iraq, in Baghdad. Was there anything in that meeting some 20 years ago that would have led you to believe that he'd be playing the role he is today?
I don't think so, but in the light of what's happened, it certainly makes it all the more interesting. I did it actually at the request of Henry Kissinger, who was then Secretary of State. I was going anyway to that part of the world, and Chase had business with the leading commercial bank in Iraq, and so I was going for that. And he asked me if I would also go to see him to say that he would like to establish closer touch with the regime. He felt that it was important that our two countries communicated more effectively. I did see him, and he was pretty cold, and he said the only way we could hope to establish closer relations would be if we would discontinue our support for Israel. Well, it was not likely that that was going to happen.
Right.
So it was not a terribly productive meeting, although in the hindsight it was certainly an interesting one.
Rockefeller goes on to state in the following paragraph in Memoirs that anyone who opposes the New World Order is a nationalistic conspiracy theorist. This is important to note, considering anyone who says there is a New World Order is considered a conspiracy theorist. This is a prime example of direct doublethink on David Rockefeller, thinking the American public won't read his book and are complete fools. All of the New World Order players who stood to gain on 9/11 are now installing a police state surveillance grid and a North American Union on the United States in order to use the United States military as a strong arm to bring the world closer to the New World Order.
Tonight, a proposal for an expanded so-called free trade zone from Alaska to the tip of South America. It's a plan from the business elites, the political elites, that will cost more American jobs, cost American sovereignty, but it would fulfill the president's father's vision. Bill Tucker reports.
It's not a new idea. President Bush talked about it back in 1991.
It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause.
Now, former United States Trade Ambassador Robert Zoellick is talking about it again with renewed vigor. This time, a new world order with business at the helm of trade and economic policy, advocating what he calls the Association of American Free Trade Agreements, a separate non-government entity which would include North, Central, and South America.
What Zoellick is really proposing here is a stealth trade agenda. It's not a national agenda. He's proposing to set up what's essentially a private organization to try to achieve what he couldn't get done when he was the U.S. trade representative. And this is a business agenda.
It's an agenda that goes hand in hand with the United States, Mexico, and Canada working quietly and behind the scenes to promote a common market with common deregulation for the benefit of multinational corporations. It's an agenda that so far has resulted in an increase in U.S. corporate profits of 45%, while wages of American workers have risen only 3% in the last 5 years.
The main danger raised by Zellick's proposals is that the future of American international economic policy, which affects not only our nation's prosperity, but its national security, will be set not by the American people and their elected representatives, but by a small corporate elite that is accountable to no one but itself.
Effectively surrendering the sovereignty of the United States.
And as justification for trusting those who would have the authority, the argument is made that free trade promotes democracy and the welfare of the people. But Lou, one has to look no further than China to see whether that, in fact, is true.
You know, talking about Zellick's proposal, it's not Zellick's proposal, it's Daddy's proposal. And people better understand that they mean exactly what they're saying. It's a new world order they're trying to create, and they're trying to do so not only without approval or consent of the governed in this country, but despite the popular will. This is a straightforward assault by the elitists in this country.
Now that we have this information, now that we know the truth about the lies of September 11, 2001, what do we do? In the following section, we will explore what you can do to take action and have an effect waking people up to the truth of the lies of 9/11.
Here's what you can do. You get about 30 people here tonight, okay? And I know that every single one of you have at least one person, family and or friend, that's a good friend that you can actually talk to. You really talk to them and you show them loose change. You get them a copy, or better yet, just sit down and go over my book, The Terror Conspiracy, with them. And then they'll be fired up. And then they'll know what you know. Okay, at that point, you got 60. Now, you get that 60 to go out, talk to one person, just one person. You know, nobody's asking you to change the world. Just go talk to one person. Now you got 120. You see how that grows? It can work. And if any of you are really fired up, there are other things you could do. You could host a book review study group in your home. Don't tell them that it's going to be on the terror conspiracy. or a movie review and show them loose change. And then start a discussion. And when somebody says, well, this is the leftist propaganda, we say, well, then what do you think brought down Building 7?
Dallas-based North Texans for 9/11 Truth is an example of a group who, on the initiative of truthaction.org, take to the streets the 11th day of every month to try to better inform people about the truth of 9/11.
We know our government can never lie to us. Just ask any Indian.
Church Building 7, that's at the bottom down.
He's such a hell of mercy.
Yeah. Supposed to hit by predators and small fires.
Yeah, that sounds like a demolition job, right?
It sure does. It was 350 feet away from the North Tower. Where it went right there. That's free fall speed, 6.56, 520.
Oh, yeah.
Down first.
Everybody else said it. Not everybody. Almost everybody.
It's not even in the commission.
Abandoned the official story. Oh, take a look at it.
Sir, are you aware how many buildings fell on 9/11?
The booter's coming from this side.
Do I know how many? I ain't got a clue, man.
You don't know?
You tell me.
Do you know how many buildings fell on 9/11? You don't know?
Tell me.
Yeah, just give me a guess. 6. Do you know how many buildings fell on 9/11, sir? You don't really know? Don't care? You know how many buildings fell on 9/11? No, there was actually 3. There was building 7,
fell at 5:18 in the afternoon and wasn't hit by a plane.
Oh, really?
And it wasn't in the 9/11 Commission report, yeah.
I'm sure of only two.
No, there were three.
What was the third one?
It was right in front of it.
Right in front
World
of it.
Trade Center, Building 7.
It was 350 feet away.
What fell down?
The building entirely collapsed at 5:20 in the afternoon.
At free fall speed in
This
less than 10
building 7
seconds.
here. Here's the towers at this end. That's a picture of the building. And it was housed the CIA and the U.S. Secret Service and the mayor's bunker. There's the building at 5:20 in the afternoon. Watch it coming down.
Something to look into, huh? Do you know how many buildings fell on 9/11, sir?
For what?
Do you know how many buildings came down on September 11th?
On September 11th?
Mm-hmm. Do you know how many buildings?
New York?
Yes.
2 buildings?
There was actually 3.
3?
Yeah, you know aware of that? There was it's called Building 7, World Trade Center number 7. It fell at 5:18 in the afternoon, and it wasn't hit by a plane. And it fell at free fall speed in less than 10 seconds. And even Dan Rather was on CBS News saying that it looked like a controlled demolition. If you look at this gentleman right here, he has a DVD player. He can show you that building coming down on video.
Well, here in just a minute, I got to fast forward to it.
Do you know 9/11 was an inside job?
You're crazy.
Are you aware of Building 7?
No, I'm not. See, you're asking the wrong question.
Oh, okay. Well, I was wondering if you knew how many buildings fell on 9/11.
I don't really know.
You don't know how many buildings fell on 9/11?
Should I know that?
Yeah, you should know that. Yeah, sure.
I'm actually more concerned with, did Reggie Bush's family really know that, didn't really take money from this guy illegally? You know what I'm saying? That's of more concern to me. This really doesn't matter because it would be preposterous. It would be preposterous to take all these incidental facts and try to weave them together into a story that, to you guys probably sounds real, but to me sounds preposterous. Okay. So, and again, I know I'll sound ignorant by saying don't confuse me with the facts.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I was just wondering if you knew how many.
Those things are all incident. No, and it doesn't really matter to me.
You don't care how many buildings fell on 9/11?
I don't really care.
Okay.
How many people died in 9/11?
3,000 plus.
Right. That's immaterial in the scope of things. I'm sorry that it happened, obviously, but when there's 5,000 babies being aborted every day, that's sort of a drop in the bucket. And I'm sorry for those families. Obviously, I have compassion for them, but I don't think if we were trying to create some sort of a conspiracy and it was an inside job, as you say, that would be even a natural place to do because the death toll was so minor. I don't know. It happened, 8 years ago, 7?
On that day, it was the only time in history the steel building ever collapsed due to fire.
Right.
And none since. And
yeah, but this was like a fire like no other fire.
Right. I understood that, but like the jet fuel can only burn so hot.
I'm sure you guys know the exact numbers of gallons and all that stuff.
Right.
But, knowing detailed information that you guys know and that I don't gives you obviously an advantage in your dialogue. What I'm trying to say is, regardless of all those incidental things that can be added up with a very low probability to achieve some result, the things that I've read in the past that I've seen on the internet, like, for example, that there wasn't a plane striking the Pentagon.
Please.
All of that kind of
that's
stuff.
disinformation.
My point is that there's people who like to make a big deal out of stuff like this, and there's people who just accept it, and I'm just one of those sober, ignorant people who just accepts it and goes along my merry way and worries about things that matter. It's like keeping weeds out of your garden versus keeping stuff from coming into your garden. And NORAD's mission isn't to watch the weeds in your garden.
Are you aware about the shoot-down orders for
Building 7?
How many buildings did you think fell? 2? 2.
Okay. At least you didn't say 9, like some people have.
Really?
Yeah, there was actually a third building that fell on 9/11.
Next to the...
Yeah, I was in front of it. It fell at 5:18 in the afternoon. It wasn't hit by a plane.
Okay.
And the owner of the building, Larry Silverstein, went on a PBS documentary and said that they pulled the building, which is a demolition term for demolishing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something to look into, huh?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
911 about how the towers fell. They really blew them up.
So what do you do for a living?
The planes didn't knock them down. They blew them up. It was a demolition. you can see the bombs going off.
The jets of gas coming out prior to the explosion.
Exactly, before the towers fell. I seen that, and at the very bottom of the building, you can see white smoke where the basement blew up before the towers before they even begin to fall.
Absolutely.
I seen that, man. It was white smoke.
Are you aware about Building 7, sir, on 9/11? Do you know how many buildings fell on 9/11?
Yeah.
How many buildings fell on 9/11?
All of them.
Well, how many is that, though? What's
7.
the number? No, well, actually, how many came down? There were 7 in the complex. Do you know how many buildings actually fell that day?
The 2 twin towers, and then they kind of, I think, messed up the other ones, right?
Yeah, that's what...
And then the building 7 just fell on its own.
Right, exactly right.
Where they said, come on, get out of there, let's get out of there, because it's fixing to fall.
Right. It fell at 5:18 in the afternoon. It wasn't hit by a plane.
Nothing even hit that building.
No, nothing.
It just fell.
My guess is that.
How many? 3. Building 7. Look into it. Google it.
Did that guy say 2 buildings fell on 9/11?
Yeah, I got people down there saying 2, and what's even crazier, a lady was actually there on 9/11, and she still said 2.
Some of the things leading up to the attack, some of the things afterwards were really suspicious, you know, like the fact that the put options were bought on all these certain companies on the World Trade Center, and you know, it's not common to buy a put option, especially just loads and loads of put options, and you know, things like that and other things like that.
"9/11 Truth is the key to unlocking the door to expose the lies and plans of the New World Order and their master plan for global domination."
Standing in front of the Pentagon that night, seeing one of our fortresses pried open by a missile airplane.
Bye.